holistic radio, spiritual radio. This is AchieveRadio.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/AchieveRadio.
Welcome to Masterful Choices, where choice really matters. I'm Monique Chapman, your host. I converse with established and upcoming conscious leaders in the fields of human potential, intuition, spirituality, and metaphysics, providing empowering information for you to live a 5-star balanced life. When you were born, you came to Earth with everything you needed to make life a success. Together, let's discover your pathway to greater success. To find out more about me, upcoming show guests, the classes, consultations, energy work, and holistic healings that I provide, visit my website, MoniqueChapman.com. Now, I've been told by my clients that I keep it real while providing accurate information and profound, deep healings as they face the lessons they agreed to learn in this particular lifetime. Do remember to follow me on Facebook and Twitter and connect with me on LinkedIn. My opt-in newsletter, Healing News, is available through my website, MoniqueChapman.com, or you can join from my Facebook page, and a brand new edition is out today. So get that newsletter. It's chock full of information. Tonight, I have the very great pleasure of speaking with Reverend Dr. Karen Tate, and we are taking your questions. So if you'd like to converse with us about our subject matter tonight, give us a call. That number is 602-666-6027. Again, that number is 602-666-6027. Once you're in the system, press star 5. That way you're connected. I can see that you're there, and I can call on you. Now, if you can't do that for whatever reason, you can always send a message via the Achieve Radio in quick message system, or you can send me a message via the chat system. Okay. My guest this evening, Reverend Dr. Karen Tate, is a published author, speaker, workshop presenter, sacred tour leader, and radio talk show host. Her book titles include Voices of the Sacred Feminine, Conversations to Reshape Our World, Goddess Calling Inspirational Messages and Meditations of Sacred Feminine Liberation Theology, Walking an Ancient Path, Rebirthing the Goddess on Planet Earth, and Sacred Places of Goddess, 108 Destinations. Dr. Tate has been named as one of the 13 most influential women in goddess spirituality and a wisdom keeper of the goddess spirituality movement. She is the media's go-to person regarding the values of the sacred feminine as deity, archetype, and ideal, and teaches how the feminine consciousness can be applied to social justice activism and is our hope for a more just and equal and sustainable future. Speaking truth to power and standing up for those without a voice, Karen has been an advocate for women's issues for 20 years. Welcome to Masterful Choices, Karen.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's great having you on. Absolutely enjoyed your book, and the one we're talking about is Goddess Calling, Inspirational Messages and Meditations of Sacred Feminine Liberation and Theology. You know, when I read the title, Karen, I was like, oh, okay, another goddess book. But boy, as you dig deep into that book, you truly connect with history on a very deep level, and it allows one to think about what has been presented to us and then what is the probable truth behind what has been presented to us. So thank you very much for bringing this to our awareness.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I'm so glad you liked it. I've had some people say it's comfort food for troubled times, and and you're so right. We and I know I was one of them. I grew up in the bubble of the Bible Belt, and we sort of just grow up thinking that what's happening everywhere around us, whether we're talking locally or globally, that it's just normal. Well, you know what? It doesn't have to be that way. It wasn't always that way. We can change things. We don't have to accept it. We can create a new normal. And, in mythology and history and all of that stuff, that has all shaped our society. And so much of it has been swept beneath the rug. And when we start to take responsibility for our own educations, I think we start to see why things are the way they are and the things we can do to change it. So life is better for more of us.
Yes, it is. Now, as you look back at your life, what were some of the key events or writings or people that were in your life that helped you get on your path? And also, when did you maybe shift your views about conventional spirituality and kind of say, well, something's not quite right here?
Okay. Well, I grew up in New Orleans, and even though, most people, when they think of New Orleans, they probably think about Mardi Gras and Bourbon Street and all of that stuff. Yeah, it wasn't a real conservative area per se, but it was still the Bible Belt. I grew up a Catholic, and it was still, our only face of the divine was a male God. Mary, as wonderful as she is, she was a role model for women. She's kind of passive and benign and obedient. She's certainly no uppity woman that's going to make waves, and demand equal rights kind of a thing. But, like I was saying before, I just accepted, that role model for women as what's normal. And it wasn't until my husband and I moved out of Louisiana, we moved to California, things really started to open up for me. It was like a veil was lifted off my eyes. I discovered the divine feminine, and it was a slippery slope for me after that. I started to understand the connection between losing a feminine face of God and why women are marginalized and subservient in society, why they don't make equal pay, why there's female genital mutilation and domestic violence and infanticide, and why there's only 20% leadership of women in, academia, corporate America, religious institutions, the whole nine yards. And really there is a direct link when that was sort of hidden from us, when the feminine face of God was swept beneath the rug, women lost their role models. They became in society what patriarchy or a male-dominated society told them their role was, and they didn't know anything else. It became it became their normal. But I read books like Rianne Eisler, for instance, Chalice and the Blade, Merlin Stone, When God Was a Woman, and that just opened my eyes to the warped view of history we've had and how that has shaped our culture.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the warped view of history, because it seems like history really isn't history, because they've left out her story, okay? They've left out her story. And we can't be complete if we're just male-dominated or female-dominated. There needs to be that balance there. Why do you think it came about, especially with the evolution of Christianity, that the patriarchs took over? It had to be male-dominated. I mean, even today, just last week on the news, there was some priest saying that he didn't want little girls to be altar boys because they couldn't become priests. So why is it that we hold on to that so tightly?
Well, there are different ways to look at this. If we look back at history, there are theories about how we lost the feminine face of God. And there are lots of different theories. There's the idea that, that Maria Gimbutas talked about. We had these Indo-European invaders that came down, and they were, a warrior race with their sky gods, and they obliterated the egalitarian, peaceful societies that revered Goddess. There's also ideas about humanity wanted to reject the idea of the cycles of life, which Goddess is, because Goddess is nature. Man didn't want to, and I'm saying man as humanity, people couldn't face the cycle of life, that they were going to die one day. So instead they came up with this new idea that they would live forever in heaven with their God, There were ideas about, that they talk about in the alphabet and the Goddess. There's ideas about environmental catastrophe, climate change. So we don't know for sure, and it may have been different reasons in different places, and it happened over a very long period of time. But people can go back and see the artifacts in museums. Goddess was being worshipped 40,000 years ago, long before a male god ever entered the picture. There's also these ideas that, Christianity, patriarchal religions, male-dominated religions, they robbed us of our connection to nature. They robbed us of our sexuality. They wanted to take everything, they wanted to take these ideas of the flesh, of the physical world, out of the equation. It used to be we thought of ourselves as sacred, as the environment and the world around us as sacred. But, all of that got taken from us, and that also sort of shaped how we see the world. That's why so many people feel like, well, it's okay to decimate Mother Nature. It's okay to destroy the environment, because they don't see it as sacred. And, of course, it's very short-term thinking for monetary gain. But if we still believe that the earth was sacred, would we allow, corporations and developers and oil companies to do the things that they do to the earth? No. But, if this is all about domination and control, there's lots of layers to this onion, and there's a lot we could talk about.
Well, girl, that's what we're here to do. We're here to talk. Now, what's your thoughts around women and how they lost the power or gave up the power initially?
I'm sorry, say again? How did it happen?
Yeah, how did women lose their power? Way back when, what was it that we just said, okay, I give, and we just turned it over to the males and said, go for it?
Well, we don't know for sure, and some of it, some of it I think has to do with some of the things I just mentioned. The Kurgan invaders, for one. I think some of the egalitarian societies were obliterated, and when you obliterate a people, when there's genocide, well, their way of life is also obliterated. I think also too, women, studies have shown that women and men, their eyes, the structure of their eyes are different. One has cones, one has rods. Women have, and I forget which one it is. I always get it confused. But basically, women see peripherally. That transfers into how they make decisions. So if a woman is thinking, how are my decisions going to affect everybody around me? And a man is thinking linear about, he's just got his eye on the prize ahead. Patriarchy exploits that because women think, well, if I, care more about myself, then how does that affect my family? Where, how does that affect the community? Am I abandoning them? Am I betraying them? Maybe I shouldn't be selfless. Maybe I ought to think about them first. There's that innate thing that women have to overcome. I think also, too, when they lost the feminine face of God, they lost role models. They lost the archetypes of the feminine that told them, yes, you can be more than a helpmate. You can be more than subservient. Yes, you were intended to be equal. You were intended to be powerful and a warrioress if necessary. We just lost the role models, and women, I think, just over time, just started to acquiesce to the patriarchal invaders, the patriarchal dominators, because they were dominating. We look back in history. People had to give up their goddess or lose their life. Pagan temples were closed because, and they were threatened to either convert to Christianity or die. So over this vast timeline of history, there are lots of different reasons.
Oh, there most certainly is. But what really caught my attention in the book was when you talked about the pilgrims coming, the pilgrims and the people coming over who were the pilgrims and what the truth was behind that. Could you share that with the audience? Because I want to start there and kind of dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, that was a talk I gave one Sunday, one sacred Sunday, and I think the talk was called, something about, truth. What do we really accept as truth? And and myth starts to become truth. And I used, I'm kind of looking in the book right now. I'm trying to separating truth from myth, and and that idea of Thanksgiving, and that's where you were going with this. I gave a talk around Thanksgiving, talking about that holiday. We've been fed this idea of the first Thanksgiving. It was about the peaceful, cohabitation of the Native Americans and the Puritans, and that wasn't what it was like at all. These Puritans came over to the New World because the people in England were not having their, fundamentalist brand of Christianity over there. So they came over here wanting to start a new world where they could practice their freedom of religion, which was too oppressive for England. So they get over here and they were ill-prepared. They were starving. The Native Americans had to help them through the winters because they didn't really know what they were doing here. When they got together for that meal at Thanksgiving, it was really to sign some sort of a treaty where they were trying to take the land, from the Native Americans. And, in that whole scenario, it was not this peaceful coexistence, We know that the Puritans thought the Native Americans were heathens. There were, we've documented these stories of, giving them smallpox and blankets, even though if it hadn't been for them, we might never have survived here on the continent when the Puritans, first arrived because we weren't equipped. But that's not what we're taught at Thanksgiving. If you're a Native American, you know about it. If you're a Native American, you don't, revere Thanksgiving, because it wasn't a good time for you. It was this, it was this time of oppression by the Puritans, who wanted to kill the heathens because they weren't Christians. So we have to think about that. We have to really, separate truth from myth. Just like when we lost the feminine face of God, I went my entire life until I was 30 years old, not even knowing about that. And I think when we start to realize, the things that are kept from us because, there's certain certain groups that want us to believe a certain version of history. That's not true. I mean, think about the Iraq War. You go into the George Bush Library in Texas, and that tells you a whole different version of really what went down with the Iraq War. you know? So history is written by the conquerors, and we always have to be aware of that. You know, it's just because it's in the history books, it doesn't mean it's the whole truth. I mean, Texas controls the content that goes into children's history books. And in our recent history, there's been a big controversy because they want to just put the conservative view of history. They don't want Thomas Jefferson in it. They don't want minorities who have contributed to history. They don't want them highlighted in it. You know, there's an awful lot that, you know, that we're taught that really isn't truth or the whole truth.
Oh, well, you know, why is it, and this is just my perception, and that can be completely wrong, but, you know, as I read your book and as I listen to you now, it seems like the white Anglo-Saxon male has issues with women, with other races. I mean, it's like, whoa. Issues.
It's true. And I mean, look, it's absolutely true. It's, I mean, I hate to say it, you know, and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, but WASPs. I remember that's not a word we hear much anymore, but I know I heard it when I was a young girl growing up. White Anglo-Saxon Protestants. You know, they are the, you know, a lot of the ones perpetuating this, you know, Ayn Rand propaganda. You know, they're a lot of the ones that are in Congress that are, you know, telling women what they can or can't do with their bodies. You know, talking about legitimate rape. Is it really legitimate rape? Trying to criminalize a miscarriage. You know, it's really crazy. But they have this idea that the United States was intended to be a Christian country, which I don't believe was the truth. You can look at what the founding fathers really said. That's why they don't want Thomas Jefferson in the history books. You can look at what the founding fathers really said, and they did not intend this to be a Christian nation. They intended this to be a nation of plurality, of many religions, of religious tolerance. But these white Anglo-Saxon men are determined to set the bar and have it their way. I mean, that's why here in California there was a big lawsuit about Tier 1 versus Tier 2 religions. If you're in a Tier 1 religion, which is the patriarchal religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, well, you do have freedom of religion. But if you're not one of those big three, you're in Tier 2, and you really don't. You really don't. And conservatives have sort of stacked the local government, the state government, and it's really hard for someone who is not one of those three big religions to go into court and say, for instance, you feel like you've been discriminated against in the workplace because you're a pagan, or you've lost your children because your husband says you're not a Christian wife, or something like that. There are places in this country, in red states in particular, where it's difficult to overcome that religious intolerance.
Well,
so maybe. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I felt like maybe I started to ramble, but
no. It was fine. I was just going to ask a question. Actually, I'll ask it because it's tied right into what you were talking about. Based on what you're saying, it sounds like, and again, folks, don't take a political side in this. I'm just throwing out what I observed. It sounds like the Tea Party today here in the United States. With there's no tolerance unless it's their religion. There's no tolerance unless it's their way of thinking, and you can't veer outside of that very long and narrow tunnel.
Right. Well, you're right, because there's no room for moderation. It's a narrow little box. There's this purity test. Are you Christian enough? Are you white enough? Are you rich enough? I think we see how that intolerance plays itself out in politics. Ronald Reagan, for instance, the Republican God. He would not even pass muster with the Tea Party. Moderation has been thrown out the window, and it's been replaced with intolerance and exclusivity, and these people don't like diversity. I mean, why do you think everything President Obama had tried to do since his first day in office has been met with opposition? I hate to say it, but I really think part of it has to do with the fact that he's black.
I agree. I brought that up to someone recently, and she became very incensed, and she's like, "No, you don't know what prejudice is." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Here's a Caucasian woman telling me I don't understand what prejudice is." When I was 5 and that cross was burned on the lawn, I don't understand what prejudice is. And there's many other examples, but it's just interesting that we can't seem to let that go and come back to a circle of being one. Why do you think that is?
Well, because I think there's a lot of fear on that side. I mean, there are studies that really have been done about the amygdala in the brain, that conservatives are more fearful people. They're the ones that are always quick to rush off to war. They've got to dominate. It's hard for them to accept diversity. They like things the way, their own way. And that translates, into a lot of different things. It translates into homophobia, into racism, into sexism, into, a callous attitude about bombing people on the other side of the world who had nothing to do with, your problems on 9/11. These people don't count. They have brown skin. They're of a different religion. It doesn't matter. We want their oil, It's really a shame, because I think they have gotten, even though they're Christian, I think they have gotten away from the teachings of Jesus, because Jesus was about he walked with the women, he overturned the tables of the money changers, he cared about the poor, but this has become I think a new brand of Christianity. It's become an ugly, intolerant, dominating, brand that really sort of, I think, gives patriarchal religion a black eye.
Well, do you think it might be time, and I know that the world isn't ready for it, but do you think it might be time just to do away with religions and people practice what they practice and others can accept it? You talk about Christianity, there's a lot of noise in the news about the Muslims. It's like you say Muslim and everybody's a jihadist, and, they can't practice, what they practice. So maybe it's time to just wipe the slate clean and let people be who they want to be?
Well, I'm thinking about that, and I don't think it's the religion so much as the interpretation of the religion, because here we have wonderful Christians, who do good things. I call them the Jesus Christians, and thank goodness for them. If it hadn't been for some of them, there wouldn't have been the, they helped the slaves escape. They helped do away with slavery in the United States. They're really good Muslim people too, and they're really good Jews, and they're really good Hindus, and on and on and on. I think it's just the people who take these religions and they warp it into something to be able to dominate and control, and and I think you can do that even if you're an atheist, I mean, you can dominate and control people even, no matter what your religious belief is or lack of religious belief. I think it's people who unfortunately have a propensity, for whatever the reason, who for them it's more about fear and their reaction to fear and their need to have power over and control, rather than people who are more loving and tolerant and, maybe see diversity as an adventure rather than something to be afraid of, So I don't think doing away with religion would necessarily solve the problem. Because I think if people are of that mindset, if religion wasn't what they used to dominate and control, it would just be something else.
Very true. Well, folks, we're speaking with Reverend Dr. Karen Tate. She's the author of Goddess Calling. If you'd like to find out more about her, do visit her website, and that's KarenTate.com. Again, that's KarenTate.com. And also on Wednesdays, you can listen to her on Blog Talk Radio. Her show, Voices of the Sacred Feminine radio show, is on, and you're going to get a wealth of information. So if you like what you're hearing this evening, tune in, because she expands it so much more. I'd like to back up a minute, Karen, and talk about some of the goddesses. For instance, who was or who is she of the 10,000 names? I'd never heard that before, and I did, a little bit of investigation into the goddess energy, but I'd never heard that. Can you talk to our audience about that?
Well, yeah, the goddess most
This is not a valid menu
title,
option.
Are you still there?
I'm still here. I don't know what menu option, but yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Well, the goddess most associated with that title, she of 10,000 names, it usually refers to the Egyptian goddess Isis. But and it's because Isis has been associated with so many different goddesses. But you can kind of think of it almost as goddess monotheism, because there are people who look at goddess and they think of her, I don't know, let's use two different metaphors. A tree with many leaves, a diamond with many facets. So there's this, maybe there's this one essence that, we kind of divide her into, different, different areas. Maybe she's the goddess of childbirth. Maybe she's the goddess of compassion. Maybe she's the warrior goddess. But on the whole, if you take her as a whole, then that's when we're talking about the many different faces of the divine. And you see, that's why I think goddess is a wonderful metaphor for diversity. You get in, she's more about pluralism. She's more about tolerance, inclusiveness, interconnection, as opposed to this fear-based stuff that we've been talking about, where there's only one face of God and you have to live like this, and this is what he teaches, and if you don't do this, you're going to go to hell. Goddess isn't like that at all. It's sort of, the opposite, the total opposite of that. It's about, in embracing the world and the people in it and the species in it as one big family. It's not about this conformity, to fit into these narrow little boxes. But, but going back to she of 10,000 names, there is a story from ancient times, from Roman times. It was called I'm drawing a blank on it right now. But Isis actually appeared to one of her devotees, and she says, "I am Diana, and I am this Artemis, and I am this goddess, and I am that goddess." And that might be part of where that came from, because she is saying, she has been called by all of these many different names, but she is Isis, she is Osset, she is Isidai, and I think she is just saying she is the one all-encompassing feminine spirit. The Hindus, I think, used to call it the sea of being. It's that feminine essence that permeates the globe, that permeates the cosmos. Mm-hmm. She's everything, in other words.
Okay, and we need to get back to that everything. So how can women today tap into the true energy of the goddess and help bring a healing to our world?
Well, it's a journey. It's a journey. For me, at first, it was about discovering there was a goddess, and then you suddenly realize how that affects you personally. And, maybe it means you discover that you weren't meant to be a second-class citizen, and you feel better about yourself, and you realize that you can be whatever you want to be, and yes, it's okay to have a sexuality, it's not a dirty thing, and then, but then it grows, you start to see how the values could change your community, could change your family, could change the world, and so it becomes about goddess, not just about deity, but then it's also about archetype. It's about ideals, to change the world. And I would recommend to women, if there's one particular goddess, or men, because this all applies to men too. This isn't just for women. If there's one particular goddess that calls to you, research her, study her, learn everything you can about her, and then if another goddess is interesting to you, learn about her. And I think you start to realize then how much there is to know. You start to learn about not just the spirituality of this, but you learn about the politics. I think you start to learn about yourself, or about your wholeness, or maybe some of the areas that maybe you want to improve upon, maybe some things that, in your life that have been suppressed that maybe you want to liberate. We're so different. We're all so different. I think she speaks to us in different ways, but we just have to trust that as we go into this, as we start to look into the different goddesses, just be gentle with yourself and allow it to unfold, and, you become like a sponge, you just sort of soak it all up, and then you just sort of trust your intuition where this journey takes you.
Now, what are your thoughts on the disrespect that women receive, especially, from the music industry? I am not too familiar with heavy metal and all of that, but I am pretty much familiar with rap music, and it seems like the majority of it seems to truly, not only disrespect women, but disrespect people in general. How can we reach people to perhaps cause a shift in their thinking so that women are valued? I mean, we bring forth life, and it seems like we're just being dishonored because of that.
Well, patriarchy, the patriarchal religions gives license to that domination, to that abuse, to that oppression. And we have to face that, for one, and we have to fight against it. The kind of things I'm talking about today, having the courage to say religion has given men license to do this to women, whether we're talking about, beating their wife with a stick and just making sure how thick it is, because the Bible has said, well, you can beat your wife as long as, the stick you beat her with is only so thick. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying this goes back a long way. We have to start taking responsibility for our own education. We have to start taking responsibility for the education our kids get. And we have to expose them, I think, to, these new ideas, which are actually the oldest of ideas, that had been swept beneath the rug. Because, as I said, our mythology shapes our culture. So when we start to have in our society, when we start telling different stories, when our kids learn about these powerful goddesses, and, then women, I think, in turn, start to demand respect. And I think women in society become respected, because women were never intended to be second-class citizens, to be whipping posts for men, to be subservient to men, to just be baby makers, to just be sex objects, you know. I think none of us were intended to be oppressed, but we lost that idea of everything on the planet being sacred. You know, we have to get back to this idea that we are all of value, that we are all sacred, and we have to teach that. You know, our children, you know, are just, I think, mimicking what's out there in society, and it's up to us what we tolerate and what we teach. You know, are we going to get up off the couch and demand better? Maybe it means starting a book club, you know, a book circle. Maybe it means, you know, doing that with our kids. You know, maybe it means spending more time with our children, you know, teaching them another way that counters what they get out there in the schoolyard, you know. We can turn this thing around. We really can, but first we have to educate ourselves, and then we in turn, I think, have to educate everybody we come in contact with to the best of our ability.
That's going to be a long education, but well worth the task at hand. And I do want to talk for a moment about domestic violence and sexual abuse, especially the genital mutilation. I didn't realize it was going on here in the United States also. It seems like all of this, you know, is done so that women can't enjoy who they are. And why is it necessary for the dominant male energy to take away our enjoyment?
It's about control, isn't it? I mean, if a woman enjoys her sexuality, then she might go out looking for it elsewhere. You know, they also want to make sure, you know, about their lineage, you know, about that their assets, you know, are being passed along to, you know, their real biological children. You know, this is really a hot button issue with me, because you know what, female genital mutilation continues because women allow it to continue. You know, instead of women saying, you know, mothers and aunties and, you know, sisters saying, you know what, I am not going to perpetuate this, they continue to buy into the tradition that in order for a woman to be marriageable, she has to have this mutilation done to her genitals. Because it could stop, you know, it could stop with education, but it's also become a cottage industry. About 2 weeks ago, I had a woman on my show who lived in South Africa and just managed to escape female genital mutilation, and she's made it one of her causes to educate about it. And, you know, we are making progress, but we have to be honest here. Men go along with it. They say it's women's business. They blame it on the women, and it's up to women, I think, along with men, to just put their foot down and realize that we don't really have to do this anymore. This is a human rights violation. You know, and these young girls, they have this done to them before they're 12 years old usually, and they don't know any better. You know, they're told that this is normal, that, you know, this is the way it needs to be. And really, I would encourage your listeners, if they don't know much about this, read everything they can on this, because this is not just some minor circumcision like, you know, male babies get. This is, you know, there are 3 different types, and this is mutilation. This is mutilation, and it's another form of control. It's another symbol of so much of humanity's sickness when it comes to sexuality too. You know, we have a lot of healing to do as human beings.
Yes, we do, and both male and female, because, you know, when something happens to you on some level, you allow it, no matter, you know, how it perpetuated way back when till now. On some level, you truly just allowed it. Now, in your book, you talk about, and I hadn't been familiar with this either, about bride burning. Now, I know arranged marriages still exist, but what is bride burning?
You know, bride burning, I know about it happening in India, and oftentimes, you know, a man will marry a younger wife, and when he dies, she is, you know, she is required to die on the fire with him. I'm not an expert in it, and I don't know all the cultural, ideas around it. But literally, a wife is expected to like throw herself on the fire when the husband dies. Also too, there are women in India that when they are a widow, they are cast into poverty unless maybe a brother of the husband might take her as a second wife or something. There's so much oppression of women in some of these other countries. We don't even know about it, here in the United States. And this is part, I think, of the learning curve. This is the part about being responsible for our own education, because women endure so much, whether it's, the female genital mutilation, the bride burning, the domestic violence, infanticide, which is the killing of girl babies, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that when girls grow up, they have to provide a dowry, so that someone will marry them, and poor families don't have money for dowries, so they kill the girl babies. I mean, it's resulted in some countries where they don't even have enough women to go around for the marriageable men. Because this has been happened for so many years that there aren't enough women. So, there's an awful lot to know about, there's, when it comes to menstrual blood, in some countries it's still considered dirty, even here to a certain extent, there's this taboo, you can't really talk about it. Well, there's menstrual huts in other countries where women are still relegated to the menstrual hut, or people think it's it can cause crops to die. It's crazy the stuff that's associated with women, that women have to endure in this day and age on this planet.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if you can hear her, but my female dog is speaking as you speak.
She's saying,
I think she's validating of what you're saying. Now, you are in a documentary. Why don't you tell us about that?
I am so proud to be in this documentary. It is called Femme Women Healing the World, and so many of my mentors are on this film, and I felt really good about it. It was put together by Sharon Stone, the actress, was one of the executive producers. Emmanuel Ita of Wonderland Entertainment also, and it's the accumulation of women's voices around the globe from many different countries, many different colors, many different cultures, talking about how things have gotten the way they are, the part religion plays in it, but what's most important, it wakes us up to solutions. And, when it boils down to it, the solution is love and partnership. But I think it's a brave film because it courageously is willing to take on the fact that there was a goddess culture and life was different then, and patriarchal religions have caused these issues. And you know what? It's not the problem of all men. This is something that is learned in our culture, and it can be unlearned. And it's going to take the two genders together, coming together in partnership, in love, in cooperation to change what is normal so that we can create a new normal, and it is possible. And I think it should be required viewing across the globe. Schools should be showing it, women's groups, men's groups, churches, temples. It's an important film, and your listeners can find it. They can go to my website, KarenTate.com. On the first page of the website, if they just scroll down a little bit, there's a link there that they can click on, and they'll have the option to either stream it live or buy a DVD or download it. Femme Women Healing the World. Highly, highly recommend it.
Okay, and folks, I took a look at it, and yes, it's well worth viewing. So, do yourself a favor. Take a look. Pass the word along, because this is one of the first steps that we can take to healing so that we can become all one. I've got a couple of inquiries here from a couple of ladies, and it's feminine energy, so I'd like to share them with you. I'm going to respond with my psychic answer. If you want to put in something, please do. But it's interesting. The first one is from Dee in Pennsylvania. She says, Monique, I wrote you a few months ago when Larry Martin was on about my house being up for sheriff's sale and the courthouse saying I own two houses. Just wanted to know if you see this coming to a close soon. It's been going on for 8 months. Should I try to get a new lawyer? She has to call him, and she gives her date of birth. And so, she's in fear about her property and where she, is going to live and how she's going to get relief, if you will, from this issue. Dee, you got a couple more months to deal with it. Keep the lawyer you got, because another one is just going to add more bad fuel to the fire. It's just going to be important that you have a very strong talk with your attorney to make sure that you and he are on the same page. Is there anything that you would like to tell Dee around just the energy of trying to hold on to her homes?
Well, I think that the challenges in our lives, sometimes, you can't, Dee, right now it doesn't look like that. But, a year from now, 2 years from now, there are going to be gifts in this awful predicament you find yourself in. And I think that's how, that's usually how things go. That there is going to be some benefit that is going to come out of this. You just have to look for what the gift is in the situation once you're past, the hardship of it.
Exactly. And Dee, thank you very much for writing in, and do let us know how that is. And actually, Larry's going to be on the show on the 25th of this month. So if you'd like to speak with him again, you'll have that opportunity on the 25th. And thank you for writing in. And then we have Emily writing in from Connecticut. She says, Hi, Monique. I've not been employed since November of last year and am interested in finding work. Do you have any insight into my financial situation over the next 3 months? And she says, many thank yous. Now, Emily, when I look at you in finances, I'm seeing a couple of things. First of all, I'm seeing you can be employed shorter than 3 months, but you've got to change your mindset a little bit, okay? And what I mean by that is you've got to start believing that you're worthy of having the job. Okay, someone has put in your head that, sometimes you're not good enough, and you are definitely good enough. I do see it being in a different industry than what you have been doing previously, so it's going to be important that you expand your horizons, so to speak, and you will find work that will be before 3 months. Your finances over the next 3 months, I see the rest of February being a little bit, well, no, we're out of February, so let me look at March. I see the rest of March being a little bit soft, picking up April, and then May I'm seeing like a flower blossom, a lotus blossom. So it's going to be good news for you. Karen, do you have any words of wisdom for Emily around the concept of money and having her own?
Well, what came to me when you were talking, Monique, I have to concur with what you said. I think she has to reinvent herself a little bit. Sometimes we get stuck in what we think is the way to go. We get sort of rigid in our outlook and our expectation. And I think if we just sort of surrender a little bit and maybe try to rethink things, the opportunity she's getting may not be exactly what she imagined for herself, but there may be a reason that it's a little bit different. So I believe you sort of addressed that. You said expand your horizons a little bit, and I think be flexible. Be flexible is think creatively, and maybe it's a reinvention of yourself. See yourself differently. differently. Maybe you are more than how you see yourself. Maybe you have a lot more to offer, and you could be describing yourself and offering yourself to employers in a much more expanded way. Don't sell yourself short.
Exactly. So, Emily, write back in or give me a call and let me know how things are going, and thank you very much for writing in. Karen, we have a few moments left. What words of wisdom would you like to share with our audience this evening?
I think it's really important that women empower one another. So often women tear each other down. They don't support one another, and I think that, that really has to stop. Because, Monique, imagine if all the oppressed people of the world, I'm talking women, workers who are exploited, minorities, immigrants, all of us, if we all banded together in solidarity, the people who hold us back and hold us down, they wouldn't stand a chance. So I think let's start with women empowering women. Don't be jealous of one another. Help one another. Look for ways to nurture and support other women, and find common ground with people who might not be exactly like you, but the person who's kind of has their boot on your neck may have their boot on their neck too. So look for ways to come together, to be interconnected, to act in solidarity, because, there are more of us than there are the exploiters and the dominators and the oppressors out there.
Most definitely. As you were saying that, it reminded me this morning I was watching the morning news, and they did a piece on a female manager who was very difficult and hard on working mothers. I mean, she didn't care about them. She didn't care about their worries. And what changed her mind was when she finally had a child of her own, and she understood. And she actually came on TV to apologize to the women that she had disrespected. And I thought that was great.
That is great. What a positive story. Because that woman probably felt like in her work environment she had to support the status quo. She had to support the patriarchy, But we have to find ways to work together for the benefit of the most of us. And, I think it's important that, that we all come together and make the world a better place for the most of us.
Yep, that's it. A world a better place for the most of us. Well, Karen, thank you so much, folks. We've been speaking with Reverend Dr. Karen Tate. Find out more about her at KarenTate.com. Buy the books. You'll love them. Thanks, Karen. We'll be in touch.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And thank you, the audience, for being with me tonight. I am honored, grateful, and appreciate your time and attention. When you're ready to shift the energy of your life to the master level, give me a call at 888-240-6057, or you can email me at Monique@MoniqueChapman.com. Of yourself enough, make an investment in yourself. And remember, the most important choice that you can make is what you choose to make important. Make the masterful choice. Choose happiness. Abundant blessings, light, and love to all. Namaste.